Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm not Sylvia. I live and work in UK. If you're just new, welcome to my channel. Okay, on this channel I talk about nursing, immigration, lifestyle and all of that. Yes guys, so on today's video I'm just going to talk about the new changes that has taken effect since last month in AHPRA for international qualified registered nurses and midwives that want to get registered with AHPRA, that's Australian Nursing Council. Okay, so if this is what you're interested about, stick around, don't go anywhere, let's dig in. Okay, so guys, I know you've seen a lot of my videos. If you haven't watched it, please go and watch how I got registered with AHPRA, how I went through the New Zealand route and all of that, the requirements and every other thing, right? There are so many changes happening now. So if you want to get registered as a nurse in Australia, please, this is the time. Don't waste time. This is the time. Don't procrastinate, guys. This is the time you have to register because the rules are changing. They are changing, right? So if this is what you're interested about, stick around like I said, okay? The first thing is to know if you're eligible, right? So this one is about international nurses that are registered in these countries that I'm going to mention. Sorry guys, if you see me like looking down, I'm just making sure I'm talking about it from the AHPRA website, okay? And before I continue, just know that I'm not a licensed immigration agent. I'm not an immigration officer. I'm not affiliated with any of them. This is solemnly based on my own research, my own previous process as I got registered with AHPRA, right? So do your own due diligence to do your research before doing any other thing, okay? As that being said, let's dig in. So the countries that are eligible for this particular process that have taken place since April of this year, that's last month, are the United Kingdom, the Ireland, the United States, Canada, which is the provinces of British Columbia and Ontario, Singapore and Spain, right? And these are the 6 countries. So from the website, they said approved list of comparable international regulatory jurisdictions for the purposes of the registration standard, general registration for international qualified nurses as of April 2025. So an NMBA approved comparable international jurisdiction possesses comparable regulatory approaches and all of that. So this is just about talking about the 6 countries that qualify for this new route, okay? Yes, so we're just gonna go down and see. It says general registration for international nurses, effective date April 2025. So it's still ongoing, right? So if you do not qualify, if you are not on this country, these 6 countries I mentioned, the previous pathway, which I already mentioned in my previous video, are still eligible, okay? But this makes it easier, this makes it faster, guys. So if you are in these countries, do not waste time, especially my UK nurses, right? Okay, so this registration standard sets out the eligibility requirements of the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Australia, that's the NMBA, for international qualified registered nurse applying for general registration as a registered nurse in Australia. The NMBA will consider the individual circumstances of an IQRN, that's the International Qualified Registered Nurse, when deciding an application for registration. Then, does this standard apply to me? This is where you see this standard applies to IQRNs who hold a qualification that is relevant to the nursing profession. It establishes 2 pathways to general registration of IQRNs who meet the qualification and eligibility requirements of section 52 and 53 of the national law and requirements of this registration standard and the NMBA's mandatory registration standards, right? So pathway 1, IQRNs applying under pathway 1 must demonstrate and provide evidence of qualification requirements under SF52 and that's section 52 and 53 of the national law. That's a relevant qualification obtained in an NMBA approved comparable jurisdiction that led to general registration as a registered nurse in that NMBA approved international regulatory jurisdiction. So this is basically, there are two pathways. I'll be showing this on the screen so you can go through. Again, you also have to meet the requirements of the following approved registration standards. That's the criminal history, they will still do that. The CPD, that's the continuing professional development, English language skills, recency of practice, and professional indemnity insurance agreement. So what happens if I do not meet these standards, right? So IQRNs who cannot meet the qualification and eligibility requirements will not be eligible for general registration via this pathway 1 and 2. The registration standard were approved by Ministerial Council on 26 September 2024. That was last year. Okay, so this is just, you can go to AHPRA website to get all this information as well. So the next one will be basically is the part 1 and pathway 1 and pathway 2 is for those seeking registration who are eligible to get registered in Australia, right? So what happens if I have started the IQRN assessment process and I think the standard applies to me? So if you already originally started with the old process and then this new process we started last month is applicable to you, or they said the NMBA has developed the pathways diagram for IQRN registration standard eligibility to help international qualified nurses candidates determine if they are eligible to meet the requirements of the registration standard. So for candidates with an open portfolio as at 23 April 2025, you will have received email communication regarding your next step if you meet the eligibility requirements of this standard. So wherever you are at any point in your process, that will let you know the new what to do next. So if you already started the old process, you should have received an email to say, okay, you are going to move into maybe the new process, the new pathway 1 and 2. So why has the NMBA developed this new registration standards? The existing pathway for registered nurse whose qualification does not meet the NMBA's requirements require that they successfully complete a multi-choice examination and a clinical examination, or that they upgrade their qualification to one that meets the NMBA requirements, right? So guys, you know already that the Australia needs nurses. There are lots of such they have society of nurses in Australia, so they're making it easier, especially for people who are registered in these 6 countries that I mentioned. So that's why is they brought out this new pathway 1 and pathway 2. Okay, so another thing is, why, for those of you that will ask, oh, why is New Zealand not on the list? So they said, why is New Zealand not listed as an NMBA approved comparable jurisdiction? New Zealand is not listed because experienced international qualified nurses who hold registration with the Nursing Council of New Zealand are already eligible to apply for registration in Australia under the Trans-Tasman Mutual Recognition Act. Guys, at this point, if you haven't watched where I gave a detailed explanation on how to register with New Zealand, please go back to watch it. Okay, so they're just saying they don't need to put it on the list because already if you have New Zealand registration, you just go through the Trans-Tasman Mutual Recognition to get registered, so you are not on this other new pathway. So it's just straightforward, and I think I got mine within less than a week, so it's very straightforward with that. So remember, you also have to work up to 1,800 hours since 2017, so you should have worked up to 1,800 practice hours. So now here is the question here: why is there a requirement of at least 1,800 practice in an NMBA approved comparable jurisdiction? I think someone has already sent me a message concerning this 1,800 practice, so if you're listening, just stick around and hear what they have to say. So the NMBA regulates the practice of nursing and midwifery in Australia, and one of its key roles is to protect the public. The requirement of at least 1,800 practice hours in an NMBA approved comparable jurisdiction helps ensure eligible experienced IQRNs first meet the professional standard criteria, processes and procedures to obtain and maintain their regulation in a jurisdiction with regulatory standards for education and registration regulatory approaches, processes, and procedures that are comparable to Australia, and have had sufficient opportunities to consolidate their professional practice in a jurisdiction where standards for nursing practice align with those expected in Australia. So the 1,800 practice hours is approximately equivalent to working 1 year full-time in Australia, calculated at 38 hours per week over 48 weeks, allowing for an average of 4 weeks of leave. This aligns with the accepted maximum weekly hours of work set by the Australian government's Fair Work National Employment Standards. So, to calculate your 1,800 hours, you must have worked a full year if your contracted hours is about 38 hours per week, and that's over 48 weeks. Do you get? So in a year, if you have a contracted hours of 38 hours per week, by 1 year you should have completed the 1,800 hours, right? So you're good to go. So I'm just gonna mention the pathway flow chart. The diagram is already on the website as well. So these flow charts are provided to help you determine if you meet the eligibility requirements of this registration standards, right? For applicants who meet the eligibility requirements of either pathway 1 or pathway 2, after completing the self-check, you will require to submit a portfolio to demonstrate you meet this registration standard. Your application will be assessed against the evidence you provide. Don't forget, guys, the eligible jurisdiction, right, are the United Kingdom, the Ireland, the United States, Canada. The provinces in Canada are British Columbia and Ontario, and Spain. Okay, so these are the 6 countries that are eligible for this new pathway 1 and pathway 2. So pathway 1, there's a pathway flow chart for you in that part. So for the pathway 1, have you completed a relevant qualification leading to general registration as a registered nurse in one of these NMBA approved comparable jurisdictions? So if you're registered under the 6 countries I mentioned, then you do the next one. If no, you may be eligible for pathway 2. So let's say yes, if you have completed in these relevant countries, if you have a license in these relevant countries I mentioned, then another question for you is, do you currently or have you previously held general registration as a registered nurse in one of the NMBA approved comparable jurisdiction? Yes, again. So if no, you do not meet the requirements of pathway 1 of this registration standard. If yes, another question, have you completed at least 1,800 hours of practice as a registered nurse in one of the NMBA approved comparable jurisdictions since 1st of January 2017? If no, you do not meet the requirements of pathway 1 of this registration standard. But if yes, to demonstrate, then you go again. To demonstrate that you have met this registration standard through pathway 1, you will need to provide evidence that you meet the requirements, eligible requirements, when you submit your portfolio. Okay, so remember that for the registration start, what you need to submit, the evidence is your offer letter, your pay slips and all of that to prove that you've actually worked, and of course reference from your manager at the office. So for the pathway 2 is, have you completed a relevant qualification leading to general registration as a registered nurse since 1st of January 2017? If no, you do not meet the requirement of pathway 2 of this registration standard. If yes, another question, have you successfully completed an examination process for international qualified registered nurses that led to registration in one of the NMBA approved comparable jurisdiction? If no, you do not meet the requirements of pathway 2 of this registration standard. If yes, do you currently or have you previously held general registration as a registered nurse in one of the NMBA approved comparable jurisdiction? If yes, remember, if no, you do not meet the requirements of pathway 2 of this registration. If yes, then you have currently held a general registration as a registered nurse in one of the NMBA approved comparable jurisdiction, or you previously held general registration as a registered nurse in an NMBA approved comparable jurisdiction. Then if you had previously held that registration, did you hold this registration at any time since January 2017? If no, then you do not meet. But if yes, since 2017, Then, have you completed at least 1,800 hours of practice as a registered nurse in one of the NMBA approved comparable jurisdictions since January 2017? If no, you do not meet. But if yes, then you have to demonstrate that you have the registration standard through pathway 2. You will need to provide evidence that you meet the eligibility requirements when you submit the portfolio. So basically, guys, you still have to provide evidence to show that you have those qualifications, and you still have to submit your evidence of work, your hours that you've worked, and all of that. Okay, so guys, remember that this whole new pathway 1 and pathway 2 are just for adult registered nurses, right? If you're a mental health nurse, I don't think it's applied to you, or pediatrics or all of that, but do your own research. I'm sure of the adult registered nurses, okay? And if you've got any questions, just leave it on the comment section. I'll be happy to reply all of them. So guys, if you're yet to register, just go straight and register with the Australian body, right? If not, you still have if you're not qualified, if you don't have the 1,800 hours, if since 2017, or you're not under the 6 countries I register, I think the old pathway, which is still current, is applicable to you. Okay, let me know in the comment section what you would like to hear. Don't forget to go to my previous video on where I spoke about how I got the New Zealand registration, the Australian registration as well. Things are really changing, the rules are changing, guys. So I think this is the best time for you to do the registration and get it done. Okay, let me know what you would like me to talk about in my next video, and thank you for watching. Don't forget to share to your friends who may want to see this video, and turn on your notification button. Thank you for sticking around to the end of the video. Bye bye.